I knew the ambush was coming the moment I walked through the security turnstile, and the guard refused to look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on his monitor like it contained the secrets of the universe. Fingers hovering over keys he had no intention of pressing. I had barely stepped off the elevator when a Teams notification buzzed against my thigh. Mandatory sync, 8:45 a.m., Executive Suite, B. No subject line, no agenda, no preview text, just the corporate equivalent of a ransom note. Let me paint you a picture. I had just delivered 17 straight months of zero critical outages. 17. Our uptime was sitting at 99.997%, which in cloud infrastructure terms is basically divine intervention. 3 weeks earlier, I had architected the disaster recovery protocol that saved us during the Meridian breach, a breach that would have exposed 340 million user records if I had not been awake at 2 a.m. running manual failover tests nobody asked me to run. But suddenly, I am being summoned to a mystery meeting like a freshman intern who forgot to mute their mic during an all-hands. When you have spent 19 years in systems architecture, you develop a radar for corporate betrayal. The way conversations stop when you round a corner, the way your calendar invites mysteriously drop off for meetings you should have been in. My radar was screaming. Rachel from DevOps was hovering near the water cooler when I passed. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it again. Her face folded into that expression people make at funerals. Marcus, a guy I had personally promoted twice, actually turned and walked the other direction when he saw me coming. That is when the calculation became simple. This was not a sink. This was a slaughter. I ducked into my office and pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside sat a manila folder, so unremarkable, it might as well have been invisible. 8 pages of legal architecture, more carefully constructed than any codebase I had ever written. I turned to page 4, ran my finger along section 9D, and confirmed what I already knew. My contract was not just a document, it was a weapon, and someone upstairs had just pulled the pin without reading the warning label. I smoothed my blazer, picked up the folder, and walked toward Executive Suite B. The calm of someone who had already won a game their opponent did not know they were playing. Let me tell you who I am. My name is Rachel Chen. My official title is Principal Cloud Infrastructure Architect. That sounds impressive until you realize it means I am the human duct tape holding together a 17-year-old tech stack that should have been decommissioned during the Obama administration. My job description says, I design resilient systems. What I actually do is prevent catastrophe. I am the reason the servers do not catch fire at 3 a.m. I am the reason our API does not collapse every time marketing runs a flash sale. I am the ghost in the machine that nobody sees until something breaks. And then suddenly, everyone wants to know why Rachel was not consulted earlier. For 19 years, I have been the invisible architecture beneath the architecture. I built our authentication framework before we had paying customers. I wrote the original database migration scripts by hand when our entire engineering team was 4 people sharing a conference room that smelled like stale pizza and desperation. I know where every deprecated function lives. I know which legacy servers still run on code I wrote in 2007 because nobody has dared to touch them since. The data center on the 7th floor smells like refrigerated anxiety and burnt coffee. Rows of server racks hum in the artificial twilight, their LED lights blinking patterns that only I can read. Most of our engineers have never even been down here They work in the gleaming, open-plan offices upstairs with their standing desks and kombucha on tap, pushing code to environments they could not physically locate if their equity depended on it. But I know every cable, every failover switch, every manual override that exists only in my memory because I never trusted anyone else enough to document it. There is a reason for that. 6 years ago, our founder, David Huang, pulled me aside after a board meeting. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from fighting battles on fronts you cannot see. "Rachel," he said, "I want you to build something for me, something that protects the infrastructure no matter who ends up running this place." He called it the Failsafe Protocol, a set of administrative controls so deeply embedded in our core systems that removing them would require rebuilding the entire platform from scratch, the kind of nuclear option you hope you never have to use. I built it. I tested it. I buried it so deep that only 2 people on Earth knew it existed. David died of pancreatic cancer 14 months ago, which meant I was the only one left who knew where the keys were hidden. Then came Derek Whitman. Derek was not hired. Derek was installed, parachuted in by the board 3 months after David's memorial service with a press release so polished it could have been written by a marketing algorithm. New Chief Technology Officer, visionary leader, 27 years old with an MBA from Stanford, and the confident vacancy of someone who had never debugged production code at midnight while users screamed at him on social media. His first week, he called an all-hands meeting and talked for 45 minutes about disruption and agile mindsets and leveraging our core competencies for maximum synergy acceleration. He used the word ecosystem 11 times. I counted. His second week, he fired our entire QA team because automated testing is the future and human verification is a bottleneck to velocity. 14 people. Some of them had been here longer than he had been alive. His hair was the color of wet sand, always arranged in that specific way that screams, "I spent 45 minutes making this look effortless." He wore sneakers that cost more than my first car, hoodies that somehow managed to look expensive, despite being the exact same cut you could buy at Target for $20. His smile was all teeth, the kind that made you feel like you were being sold something, even when he was just saying good morning. "Legacy systems are technical debt," he announced during his first one-on-one with me. His feet were propped on his desk like a teenager who had just inherited a Ferrari. "We need to sunset all this outdated infrastructure and migrate to a modern cloud-native stack." I tried to explain that our legacy systems were not debt. They were load-bearing walls. You could not just tear them out without understanding what they were holding up. He nodded along with that glazed expression people get when they are already composing their rebuttal instead of listening. "That is adorable," he said when I finished, "but I was not hired to maintain the status quo. I was hired to transform it." 3 months later, his transformation had already cost us 2 major clients and tripled our incident response time. But he had an explanation for everything. Growing pains, necessary disruption. You cannot make an omelet without breaking a few legacy dependencies. The thing about Derek was not just his incompetence. It was his absolute certainty that he was the smartest person in every room he walked into. The kind of confidence that mistakes silence for agreement and disagreement for jealousy. I was not on his radar at first. I was just another gray-haired technical resource in a company he was trying to drag into the future. But then something changed. Someone on the board mentioned that I had been the lead architect on the original platform. Someone else asked why I had not been consulted on the migration roadmap. And suddenly, Derek saw me differently. Not as a resource, as a threat. Before I walk you through exactly how Derek Whitman managed to detonate his own career with surgical precision, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a like. You are going to want to stick around for this one. Because what happens next is the corporate equivalent of watching someone light a match in a fireworks factory while standing in gasoline. The story only gets better from here, or worse, depending on whether you are Derek. Back to the meeting. I pushed open the door to Executive Suite B at exactly 8:45. The room was engineered for intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows that made everyone inside look like they were floating above the city. The conference table was a single slab of reclaimed oak, long enough to land a small aircraft on. Derek was already seated at the head, flanked by two HR representatives I had never seen before. They had that specific look of people who had been briefed on exactly what to say, and were already regretting it. Behind them, barely visible in the corner, sat our CHRO, Linda Monroe, legal pad in hand, expression like she was watching a car accident in slow motion. There was no laptop open, no presentation queued up, no performance metrics to discuss, just a single sheet of paper centered in front of Derek like an offering. "Rachel," Derek said with a smile that did not reach his eyes, "thanks for joining on such short notice." "Of course," I replied, taking the seat directly across from him. "Always happy to sync." He gestured toward the paper. "I am going to cut right to it. We are restructuring the technical organization, flattening hierarchies, eliminating redundancies. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." The HR representatives shifted in their seats. Linda's pen stopped moving. I let the silence stretch for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. "Understood," I said. My voice was steady, almost pleasant. "Is there a specific performance concern you would like to document, or is this purely structural?" Derek's smile flickered. "It is a strategic decision. Nothing personal. We are bringing in fresh perspective to modernize our approach." "Fresh perspective," I repeated. "I see." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And this has nothing to do with my quarterly vesting that was scheduled for tomorrow morning." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I do not know what you are implying." "I am not implying anything." I pulled the folder from my bag and placed it on the table between us. "I am just confirming that you are terminating my employment approximately 18 hours before $3.2 million in equity grants were scheduled to vest, which activates Section 9D of my original employment agreement." Derek glanced at HR. They glanced at each other. Nobody moved. "Section 9D," I continued, "establishes that any termination without documented cause occurring within 72 hours of a scheduled equity event triggers immediate accelerated vesting at the pre-termination value, plus a retention penalty calculated at 1.75 times my annual base compensation, plus full benefits continuation for 36 months. I slid the folder across the table toward Linda. Page 4, all signatures present, including David Huang and, interestingly, the current board chair, Lawrence Chen. His initials are on every page. Derek's face had gone the color of old milk. That clause is not enforceable. It is extremely enforceable, I said. In fact, I helped draft the language myself back in 2018 specifically to prevent exactly this kind of last-minute maneuver. I also have 3 time-stamped backups of the executed agreement, including one in a secure location that automatically notifies external counsel if my access credentials are terminated without a matching clause acknowledgement. The room had become very still. Linda was reading the document now, her expression shifting through confusion into something that looked a lot like horror. I stood slowly, smoothing my blazer. I will give you until end of business to have legal review the implications. But I should mention that I have already forwarded the relevant documentation to Aaron Kaplan in compliance and Jennifer Walsh in investor relations. I turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing. You might want to check who has administrative access to the Failsafe Protocol before you make any more restructuring decisions. There are some systems that do not respond well to unexpected leadership changes. Then I walked out of Executive Suite B like I was headed to lunch. Behind me, I heard Derek's voice crack as he said, "Someone get legal on the phone right now." But what Derek did not understand, what nobody in that room understood, was that firing me was not the end of their problems. It was the beginning. You see, 19 years earlier, David Huang had given me more than just a job. He had given me root access, not to the servers, although I had that too, root access to the governance architecture of the entire platform, the administrative controls that determined who could deploy code, who could access production data, who could modify the security protocols that kept our 340 million users safe. David called it insurance. He knew that someday the company would outgrow him. He knew that future leadership might not share his values. So he built a failsafe, and he put me in charge of it. The protocol itself was elegant. A series of cryptographic keys distributed across 17 different secure locations, each one requiring my personal authentication to activate. Without all 17 keys, the system operated normally. But if someone tried to force a major architectural change without proper authorization, tried to bypass the security controls, tried to access the protected infrastructure without going through the proper channels, the entire platform would simply lock down, not crash, not delete anything, just lock. Every permission revoked, every access point sealed. A digital fortress that could only be reopened by someone who knew where all the pieces were hidden. I had never used it, never even come close. David and I had agreed it was a weapon of last resort, a dead man's switch for corporate governance. But David was gone now, and Derek had just made himself the first person in 19 years to trigger the activation sequence. It took approximately 4 hours for the first domino to fall. At 1:17 p.m., Derek's engineering team attempted to push a code deployment that would have disabled several of my monitoring scripts. Standard procedure after a termination. They probably thought, clear out the old guard's fingerprints. Except those monitoring scripts were tied to the Failsafe Protocol's first layer of authentication. The moment the deployment was rejected, I received a notification on my personal device. Someone was trying to modify protected infrastructure without proper authorization. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, working my way through a crossword puzzle and enjoying a cappuccino that cost more than it should have. The place smelled like freshly ground beans, an industrial-strength ambition, filled with startup founders tapping away on MacBooks and pretending to be the next unicorn. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and I smiled. Stage 1, activated. Back at headquarters, Derek was staring at his monitor like it had personally betrayed him. The deployment had failed with an error message nobody on his team had ever seen before. Administrative override required. Contact system architect for authorization. System architect. Derek muttered. That is supposed to be me now. He tried again. Same error. He tried bypassing the normal deployment pipeline, going directly through the back-end console. Same error. He tried using his emergency administrator credentials, the ones AITA had provisioned for him on his first day. Access denied. Insufficient authorization level. Marcus from DevOps knocked on his door around 2 p.m. His face had that particular shade of green that engineers get when they realize something is very, very wrong. Derek, we have a problem. The authentication service is throwing errors we have never seen before. Every time we try to push changes, the system demands authorization from someone called Principal Cloud Infrastructure Architect. Derek's eye twitched. That position has been eliminated. Marcus nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are trying to figure out how to deliver bad news to someone who does not want to hear it. Right. Except the system does not know that, and it will not accept any other authorization. Derek grabbed his phone and called AITA. They had never seen anything like it. The lockout was operating at a level below their access. He called the cloud vendor. They said the authentication framework was custom, proprietary, built into the core architecture in ways they could not modify without credentials they did not have. By 3 p.m., the first customer complaints started rolling in. A scheduled maintenance window had been missed because the deployment team could not push the necessary updates. A minor bug that should have been patched in 15 minutes was now affecting the user interface for approximately 40,000 active users. Jennifer Walsh, from Investor Relations, sent Derek a carefully worded email asking if there was anything she should know before the afternoon trading session opened. Derek did not respond. By 4 p.m., the situation had escalated. 3 separate production systems were now throwing the same error, refusing any changes until someone with proper authorization cleared the block. The engineering Slack channel was a wall of confusion and panic. Someone had created a channel called WTF is Happening. It was gaining members faster than any company initiative in recent memory. A junior engineer named Tommy, fresh out of boot camp and still naive enough to speak truth to power, posted a message that would later be screenshot and shared across the entire organization. Has anyone tried contacting Rachel Chen? She built most of this infrastructure. Maybe she knows what is happening. Derek saw the message and immediately deleted it. Then he deleted Tommy's access to the channel. Then he regretted both decisions when he realized that deleting messages in Slack does not actually delete them from the server logs. Server logs that I had designed specifically to be tamper-proof. Someone finally thought to check the system logs. Deep in the authentication records, they found a single line of text that explained everything and nothing. Failsafe Protocol engaged. Authorization required from Principal Cloud Infrastructure Architect. They fired the Principal Cloud Infrastructure Architect. Someone typed in the chat. A long pause. Then another message appeared. Oh no, Rachel from DevOps, no relation to me, despite the name, was the first to put the pieces together. She had been at the company for 8 years. She remembered the old days, before Derek, before the restructuring. Back when David Huang would walk the halls and ask engineers about their projects like he actually cared about the answers. She pulled up my original employment contract from the HR archives. It took her 4 hours to find it because someone had recently reorganized the filing system according to Derek's new efficiency guidelines. But when she finally opened the document and scrolled to page 4, she let out a whistle that could be heard 3 cubicles away. Holy motherboard, she whispered. She built a kill switch. Derek spent the next 6 hours on the phone with everyone who might be able to help. Legal said they were still reviewing the contract implications and suggested he not make any additional personnel decisions until they had completed their analysis. HR said this was above their pay grade and recommended he contact the board directly. The cloud vendor said the lockout was operating as designed. They could not override it without credentials they did not have. And honestly, whoever designed this system was either a genius or completely paranoid, possibly both. At 9 p.m., Derek tried reaching out to some of my former colleagues, hoping someone might know a back door or a workaround. Marcus said he did not know anything about the Failsafe Protocol, and even if he did, he was not sure he would tell Derek at this point. Jennifer, from Investor Relations, said she had already heard from 3 board members asking what was happening. She really needed some answers before morning. At 11 p.m., Derek finally tried calling me. I watched his name flash on my screen, considered answering, decided against it. The phone rang 7 times, then went to voicemail. He did not leave a message. 15 minutes later, he called again. Same result. At 11:47 p.m., he sent a text. "Rachel, we need to talk. This is urgent. Please call me." I read the message, smiled, and went back to my crossword puzzle. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. By the following morning, the situation had metastasized beyond anything Derek could have anticipated. The overnight monitoring systems, the ones I had built to automatically flag potential security incidents, had detected the unusual activity. They escalated according to their programmed protocols, which meant that at 6 a.m., the board chair, Lawrence Chen, received an automated alert. Multiple critical systems were in a degraded state. Normal operations had been suspended, pending administrative review. Lawrence was a patient man. He had built 3 companies before this one and had seen his share of crises. But when he opened his email and saw 17 separate system alerts, 4 investor inquiries, and a resignation letter from one of the senior engineers who had decided this was a good time to pursue other opportunities, his patience evaporated like morning dew on a hot sidewalk. He called Derek at 6:15 a.m. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, Derek looked like a man who had just been told his house was on fire and his insurance had lapsed. The stock price opened down 4% on rumors of technical instability. By noon, it had dropped another 2% after a tech blog published a story with the headline, "Major Cloud Platform Experiences, Mysterious Outages. Questions emerge about leadership changes." The article did not mention my name, but it did mention that a senior technical leader had recently departed, and that sources inside the company were expressing concerns about the transition. 2 enterprise clients called to demand explanations for the service disruptions. One of them, a healthcare company that depended on our API for patient data synchronization, made it very clear any further outages would result in contract termination, in a very public explanation of why they were seeking alternative providers. The board chair requested an emergency briefing. The CFO requested a damage assessment. The head of sales requested an explanation he could give to customers that did not make the company look incompetent. Nobody had any good answers. And Derek Whitman, the visionary leader who was going to transform our company into the future, was pacing his corner office like a trapped animal, his tie loosened, his expensive sneakers squeaking against the floor. His hair, usually so carefully arranged, now looked like he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. His hoodie was wrinkled. His face carried the gray pallor of someone who had not slept and was beginning to realize that sleep might not be coming anytime soon. At 10 a.m., he made the mistake of posting a message in the engineering Slack channel. Team, I know we are facing some challenges with our deployment infrastructure. I want to assure everyone that we are working diligently to resolve these issues. Please remain calm and focused. The response was immediate and brutal. 13 engineers reacted with the thinking face emoji. 7 added the fire emoji. 1 person, anonymous, through a burner account that would later be traced back to a contractor who had already given notice, simply replied with a link to my LinkedIn profile and the words, "Maybe try calling her." Derek deleted the message. Then he deleted the entire channel. Then he created a new channel called Official Communications Only with Posting, restricted to leadership. Within an hour, someone had created an unofficial channel called Derek Watch. Engineers shared real-time updates on his increasingly erratic behavior. I know all this because Jennifer Walsh texted me a running commentary. She had always liked me. More importantly, she had always disliked Derek. When he was hired, she had been the one to warn me that the board was looking for someone to shake things up, which in her experience usually meant someone young enough to not know what they were shaking and confident enough to not care about the mess they made. He is losing it, she wrote. Just yelled at an intern for asking about the deployment freeze. I replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I was not invited, obviously, but I did not need to be there to know what was happening. I had spent 19 years learning how this company's immune system worked. I knew exactly how long it would take for the infection to spread. At 1:47 p.m., I received a formal email from Meredith Tan, the board's outside counsel. The subject line was simple: contract review and settlement discussion. The body was longer, but the message was clear. They had read Section 9D. They had done the math. They were ready to talk. I waited 2 hours before responding, just long enough to let them sweat. At 4:15 p.m., I walked back into the building I had been escorted out of the day before. This time, security nodded respectfully. The receptionist offered me coffee. The elevator seemed to move faster than I remembered. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Derek was seated at the far end, looking like he had aged a decade overnight. His hair was disheveled, his hoodie wrinkled, his face carrying the gray pallor of someone who had not slept. Linda Monroe sat beside him, legal pad full of notes she clearly wished she had not needed to take. On his other side sat the CFO, Martin Webb. He had the expression of a man calculating exactly how many zeros this disaster was going to cost. But the real power in the room had shifted. Lawrence Chen, the board chair, sat at the head of the table now. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and the calm, deliberate manner of someone who had survived enough corporate battles to know that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. Meredith Tan was on his right, a stack of documents in front of her that I recognized as copies of my employment agreement, my original contract addendums, and what appeared to be a preliminary legal assessment of the company's exposure. 2 other board members I recognized from company photos flanked them, looking grim. The empty chair was waiting for me. I sat down slowly, placed my folder on the table, and waited. Lawrence spoke first. "Rachel, thank you for coming in. I believe we have some matters to discuss." I nodded. "I believe we do." Derek opened his mouth, probably to launch into one of his prepared speeches about transformation and fresh perspectives, but Meredith cut him off with a raised hand. "Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that mistakes were made." She paused, glancing at Derek with an expression that could have frozen lava. Significant mistakes in judgment, in process, and in understanding of existing contractual obligations. She slid a document across the table toward me. "This is a preliminary settlement offer. Full vesting of all outstanding equity at yesterday's closing price. Continued benefits for 48 months. A consulting agreement at your standard rate, should you choose to assist with the transition. And a written acknowledgement that your termination was premature." I did not touch the paper. I already knew what it said. I had known what it would say before I walked into the building yesterday. The numbers were generous, more than Section 9D strictly required, which told me they were scared. Good. They should be. That is a fair starting point, I said. But it does not address the core issue, which is, I leaned forward slightly. The Failsafe Protocol is not a bargaining chip. It is a governance mechanism designed to prevent exactly what happened yesterday. Firing me does not deactivate it. Settling with me does not unlock it. The only way to restore normal operations is to follow the proper procedures. Lawrence exchanged a glance with Meredith. His expression suggested he had suspected as much, but had been hoping I might be more amenable to a simple financial resolution. "And what procedures are those?" I smiled. "The ones outlined in the documentation I provided to David Huang 6 years ago. Documentation that should be in the company's secure archives, filed under emergency governance protocols. You will find detailed instructions for proper succession planning, including the process for transferring administrative authority to a qualified replacement." Lawrence's eyebrows rose. "You documented this?" "Of course, I documented it. I am an architect. Documentation is what I do." I paused, letting the implication settle. David and I spent 3 months designing the transition framework. We anticipated exactly this scenario, a situation where leadership changes might create governance gaps. The protocol is not meant to hold the company hostage. It is meant to ensure that whoever takes over actually understands what they are taking over. Derek's voice cut in, sharp with frustration. "This is blackmail. She is holding our systems hostage until we give her what she wants." The room went quiet. I turned to face him directly for the first time. "Mr. Whitman," I said, keeping my voice level, "I am not holding anything hostage. I am enforcing a governance structure that was designed to protect this company from impulsive decisions. The fact that you find it inconvenient does not make it illegitimate." I turned back to Lawrence. The protocol was never meant to be permanent. It was designed as a safety mechanism during leadership transitions. All I am asking is that you follow the transition process correctly, document the succession, establish proper oversight, ensure that whoever takes over my responsibilities actually understands what those responsibilities entail. Derek slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane. She is a terminated employee. She has no right to dictate how we run our systems." Meredith's voice was ice. "She has every right to enforce a contract that you signed, that we all signed." She opened another document, Section 9D, Paragraph 4. "In the event of disputed termination, the employee shall retain administrative authority over all systems explicitly designated under their original scope of work until such time as a formal transition process is completed and documented." She looked up. "You did not just fire her, Derek. You activated every protection she built into her employment agreement over 19 years. Protections that David Huang personally approved. Protections that this board ratified without reading." Apparently, the silence stretched. Derek's face had gone from pale to flushed to something that looked almost purple. Lawrence cleared his throat. "Rachel, what exactly do you want?" "I want what I have always wanted. I want the company David built to survive, whoever ends up running it. That means proper governance, proper succession, and leadership that actually understands what they are managing." I paused, letting the words settle. Right now, you have a CTO who does not know what systems he is responsible for, who terminated the one person who did, and who is currently watching your stock price drop because he thought he could save $3 million by firing me 18 hours early. I slid my folder across the table toward Lawrence. "Here is what I propose. You honor the full terms of Section 9D. You appoint a transition committee to document and transfer the administrative authorities. You allow me to train my replacement properly, which will take approximately 6 weeks given the complexity involved. And you conduct a thorough review of Mr. Whitman's restructuring decisions to determine whether they were made in the company's best interest or simply to consolidate his own authority." Derek shot to his feet. "You cannot be serious." Lawrence did not look at him. "And if we decline?" I shrugged. "Then the Failsafe Protocol remains engaged. Your engineering team will continue to be locked out of protected systems. Your deployment pipeline will remain frozen. And in approximately 72 hours, when the cascading authentication failures start affecting your production environment, you will have much bigger problems than a settlement negotiation." I stood, smoothing my blazer, exactly the way I had when I walked out the day before. "I will give you 24 hours to decide. But I should mention that I have already received 3 calls from recruiters this morning, including one from your largest competitor. It would be a shame if the failsafe documentation ended up being the only thing protecting your infrastructure from someone who did not have your best interests at heart." Then I walked out of the boardroom, past the receptionist, through the security turnstile, into the afternoon sunlight. Behind me, I heard Lawrence's voice cut through the silence. "Derek, you and I need to talk. Now." The settlement was finalized 4 days later. The final numbers exceeded even Section 9D by a considerable margin. Full equity vesting at a premium valuation, reflecting the reputational damage caused by the botched termination, totaling $4.8 million. 48 months of benefits continuation, worth approximately $300,000. A consulting agreement at 3 times my previous rate, which worked out to about $750 an hour for any transition work I agreed to perform, and a written acknowledgement, signed by the board chair himself, that my termination had been improper, procedurally flawed, and rescinded, effective immediately. The total package came to just under $6.2 million. Derek had tried to save the company $3.2 million by firing me 18 hours early. Instead, he had cost them nearly double that amount, plus the stock price damage, plus the client confidence issues, plus the engineering morale collapse that would take months to repair. The irony was not lost on anyone. But the real victory was not about money. It never had been. Derek Whitman was reassigned the following week. His new title was Strategic Innovation Advisor, which in corporate terminology means you have an office, a salary, and absolutely no authority over anything that matters. The announcement was carefully worded to suggest he would be exploring exciting new opportunities within the organization. Everyone who read it understood it meant he had been neutered. I heard from Jennifer that his new office was on the 2nd floor. next to the copy room and the vending machines. His previous corner suite on the executive floor had been converted into a meditation space for stressed employees. The symbolism was not accidental. His LinkedIn profile still listed him as CTO for about 2 weeks after the reassignment. Then it quietly changed to strategic advisor. Then, 3 months later, he announced he was leaving to explore opportunities in the startup ecosystem, which is what people say when they have been quietly encouraged to explore opportunities elsewhere and have finally accepted that the encouragement is not going to stop. Linda Monroe resigned 6 weeks after the settlement was finalized. The official statement mentioned pursuing new challenges in a different sector. The unofficial story, which Jennifer shared with me over drinks one evening, involved a detailed review of HR's role in the termination decision. The review had not gone well. Multiple process failures had been identified. Documentation had been missing. Warnings had been ignored. The board had questions that Linda could not answer satisfactorily. She found a position at a smaller company about 3 months later. Smaller title, smaller salary, smaller profile. Sometimes that is how these things work out. The Failsafe Protocol was formally transitioned to a governance committee, exactly as David Huang had originally intended. The committee included Lawrence Chen, the new interim CTO, Sarah Martinez, and 2 independent technical advisors who actually understood what they were overseeing. I spent 6 weeks training 3 senior architects on the system's architecture, documenting every override and authentication mechanism I had built over 19 years. When I finally handed over the last cryptographic key, I felt something I had not expected. Relief, pride, completion. The company David built would survive. Maybe not forever, maybe not in the form he imagined, but the foundations were solid and the protections were in place. Someone would come along eventually and try to tear it all down again. Someone always does. But at least now, there were safeguards, procedures, documentation that explained why things were built the way they were built, and what would happen if someone tried to bypass them. 3 months after my departure, I received an email from a recruiter at Westbridge Technologies, one of our largest competitors. They had heard about what happened. They wanted to talk about a senior architect position, autonomous team, equity stake, full creative control over infrastructure design. The kind of offer you dream about when you are stuck in meetings about synergy, acceleration, and agile mindset transformation. I took the meeting. Then I took the job. On my last official day at my old company, I received a message from Lawrence Chen. Short, professional, exactly what you would expect from a board chair who had just paid $6 million to clean up someone else's mess. Thank you for your 19 years of service. Your contributions have been invaluable. We wish you well in your future endeavors. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things do not need to be said. Instead, I walked to my window one last time. The server room hummed below me. LED lights blinking in patterns I knew by heart. Outside, the city stretched toward the horizon, all glass and ambition, every tower trying to outshine the next. I thought about David, about the night he asked me to build something that would outlast both of us, about the weight of carrying that responsibility alone for so long. Then I picked up my bag, walked to the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors opened onto a future I had not planned for the first time in 19 years. I did not know what came next. It felt terrifying. It felt liberating. It felt exactly right. I stepped outside, felt the sun on my face, and smiled. Let them try to run it without me. Let them discover all the little things I never bothered to document. Let them learn, the hard way, that some systems cannot be replaced with fresh perspective and agile mindsets. I was done holding the world together. It was someone else's turn now. And somewhere in a server room, 7 floors up, a single LED light blinked green, then amber, then green again. The machine was still running, just like I built it to. Big thanks for sticking around, you magnificent troublemakers. Subscribe to keep the chaos flowing. Share it with someone who needs to know that the quiet ones are always watching. And remember, the next time someone tells you that nobody reads the fine print, smile and nod, because the ones who do are the ones who win.